The rustic, two-story library sat nestled on the corner of Main Street, practically hidden in plain sight amidst the other architectural giants of the small town. The heart of the town still beat with the rhythm of the good old days, and the library was a testament to that sentiment. It was an unassuming Friday when a boisterous group of teenagers, Ethan, Alex, Sarah, Olivia, and Noah, found themselves venturing into the library. Their motives weren't academic. Instead, they were driven by a thirst for thrills and an unwavering spirit of adventure. As they aimlessly roamed through the aisles lined with old books, a particular dusty, worn-out tome caught Ethan's eye. The book was thick and bound in weathered leather, looking like it had been untouched for decades. Its faded title read, "The Legend of the Woodland Witch." Intrigued, Ethan pulled it out and blew off the dust, causing a minor coughing fit among the group. "No way. The old witch tale." Sarah laughed as she took the book, her dark eyes twinkling with amusement. The town was rife with legends and ghost stories, but the Witch of the Woods was perhaps the most enduring tale. An old legend, passed down for generations, of a witch not of this world, a species from hell that supposedly lived in the neighboring forest, preying on unsuspecting visitors. As Sarah started reading aloud, the group huddled around her, sniggering at the ghastly descriptions of the witch. Her laughter filled the silent library, turning heads of the few others present. Alex rolled his eyes dramatically at the detailed account of the witch's appearance, while Noah and Olivia mimicked fear, clinging onto each other with exaggerated gasps. "What a load of bull," Noah announced, chuckling, his voice echoing slightly in the otherwise quiet library. "I mean, come on, a witch in the woods. What is this? The Middle Ages?" Amid the laughter and jokes, an idea started to form. A camping trip. Not just any camping trip, but a creepy holiday deep into the very forest where the witch was said to reside. A test of courage and a chance to debunk the town's silliest tale. Ethan suggested it, grinning widely at his friends. "Let's camp in the woods. Let's make a holiday out of it, a creepy witch-hunting holiday," he proposed. Laughter erupted, but also a certain spark in their eyes, the allure of the unknown, the thrill of potential danger, and the heartening prospect of shared adventure. "We're totally doing this," Olivia finally agreed, smirking at Ethan, her eyes gleaming with excitement. So, it was decided. A trip to the woods, a weekend of camping, all in the name of making fun of an old tale. They had no idea then how their world was about to be turned upside down. But that day, all they had was a book, their laughter, and their plans for the most thrilling holiday they could ever imagine. Little did they know, they were about to walk right into the very story they found so amusing. The dawn arrived, painting the town in shades of crimson and gold. The birds chirping formed a symphony, filling the air with anticipation. Today was the day. The day when the group of teenagers would set out on their adventure. The day when the age-old tale of the witch would serve as a backdrop for their daring camping trip. Their meeting point was at Ethan's house, and one by one, the group assembled, each carrying their own share of camping gear, the laughter and excitement permeating the cool morning air. Alex arrived last, driving an old but sturdy SUV, spacious enough for them and their equipment. They piled their stuff into the trunk, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Ethan sat shotgun, holding the old, worn-out book they had borrowed from the library. It was their roadmap into the unknown, their invitation to what they assumed would be nothing more than an amusing adventure. The ride was long but far from boring. The car echoed with their laughter and conversations. Ethan read aloud from the book, his voice thick with faint horror. Sarah would join in, adding sound effects, causing bouts of laughter. Olivia and Noel looked out at the passing trees, the greening landscape marking their departure from civilization and the approach of the fabled witch's domain. They joked about who the witch would take first. Noah, being the most muscular, bragged about how he'd fight off the witch single-handedly. Alex mimicked a scared girl and said that he'd probably faint at the first sight of anything scary. Sarah and Olivia made a pact to stick together, no matter what. All this was done in jest, their disbelief in the legend acting as a safety net to their bravado. By late afternoon, they arrived at their camping site, a small clearing surrounded by towering trees, casting long, eerie shadows. It looked beautiful and menacing at the same time. A perfect setting for their witch tale adventure. They began setting up their camp, pitching tents, starting a fire, their laughter and chatter bouncing off the silent woods. As the evening turned to dusk, the woods came alive with the hoots of owls and rustling of nocturnal creatures. The teenagers sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows, Ethan reading passages from the book, building up the suspense. Despite their bravado, the chilling description of the witch and the eeriness of the forest started to creep under their skin. Their laughter got a little quieter, their glances a little more nervous. But they shook off the feeling, reminding themselves it was all make-believe, a figment of their town's folklore. The first night of their adventure was about to begin, and they had no idea what was coming for them. As they huddled together under the flickering firelight, a shiver ran down their spines, not from the cold, but from the looming uncertainty of what they had walked into. The ancient forest around them rustled, as if whispering a warning. Their adventure was about to become a terrifying ordeal. Night fell on the forest like a dark cloak, wrapping everything under its vast, starlit expanse. The chirping of the daybirds was replaced by the hunting calls of the nocturnal creatures, and the rustling of the leaves echoed eerily, carried by the cool night breeze. The group, huddled around their campfire, fought off the creeping cold with their laughter and banter. Ghost stories were exchanged, each trying to outdo the other in their tales of horror and gore. Yet, every so often, their eyes would dart to the surrounding darkness, betraying an undercurrent of unease. As the fire crackled and danced, Ethan pulled out the old book, the lamplight falling on its weathered pages. The story of the witch, they agreed, would be their midnight tale. With a dramatic flourish, Ethan started reading out loud, his voice cutting through the night, resonating through the silent woods. The detailed descriptions of the witch, her dreadful form, her terrifying powers, and her predilection for the innocent, made for a bone-chilling narrative. Every word seemed to echo around them, settling heavily in the air, while the book's faded illustrations added a terrifying realism to their minds. Unsettling sounds seemed to filter in from the forest, the cracking of twigs, the faint rustling of leaves, the strange animal cries. It all amplified the effect of the story, and goosebumps pricked their skin, despite their bravado. Suddenly, in the midst of their storytelling, they felt it. A prickling sensation, as if they were being watched. Their laughter faded, jokes ceased, and a heavy silence hung in the air. Each of them felt it, a piercing gaze, from the depth of the woods, unseen but palpable. An unsettling feeling of being observed crawled under their skin, diluting their skepticism and replacing it with growing apprehension. The once familiar sounds of the forest were now pregnant with hidden dangers. Every rustle, every whistle of the wind sounded menacing. And then they saw it. A fleeting shadow, a figure in the distance, obscured by the thick foliage. Too dark to make out, yet too real to be just their imagination. "Did you guys see that?" Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with a sudden fear. The group followed her gaze into the darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests. There it was, a tall, dark figure standing at the edge of their campsite, watching. Their initial reaction was of disbelief, their minds racing to find a logical explanation. "Maybe it's a bear," Alex suggested, trying to suppress his growing fear. But they all knew it wasn't a bear. The figure was too lean, too upright, too human-like. The first night in the woods took a sinister turn. The veil of skepticism was slowly lifting, replaced by a creeping dread that something was horribly wrong. The forest around them no longer seemed a part of their adventurous plan, but a living entity, hiding something wicked within its shadows. As they retired to their tents, the feeling of being observed lingered, making the darkness outside feel a little darker, the silence a little too silent. With the break of dawn, the group woke to find the forest bathed in a soft, golden light, the eerie sounds of the night replaced by the harmonious melody of the morning birds. The dark figure from the night before felt like a dream, an echo of their overactive imaginations fueled by the old witch's tale. The daylight brought relief and a semblance of normalcy, but the underlying tension was palpable. As the morning progressed, the teenagers busied themselves with their camping chores, half-heartedly laughing about the scare they had given themselves the previous night. Yet, there was an unspoken agreement not to venture too far into the woods alone. The events of the night had left an imprint, a slight shiver that ran down their spines whenever they looked into the forest's depth. The day passed in a blur, with them trying their best to regain the carefree spirit they had started with. But as the sun began to set, casting long, creepy shadows, the apprehension from the previous night started to creep back in. The forest around them seemed to grow darker, denser, more ominous. As night fell, they found themselves huddled around the fire, much quieter than the night before. The ghost stories were replaced with uneasy silence, and every sound from the forest felt louder, closer, more threatening. It was during one of these silences that they noticed that Noah was missing. Noah, the strongest among them, the one who had joked about fighting off the witch, was not in his tent. His absence sent a ripple of fear through the group. They called out to him, their voices echoing eerily in the quiet woods, but there was no response. The witch's tale that they had laughed about seemed to hang in the air around them, like a grim prophecy coming true. With torches in hand, they decided to look for Noah. The light from their torches danced on the trunks of the trees, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to come alive. As they searched, they came across a disturbing sight: Noah's jacket, torn and muddy, caught in a thorny bush. A feeling of dread washed over them as they held the torn piece of fabric. The once harmless camping trip now felt like a horrifying trap they had walked into. Their jokes and dismissal of the witch's tale felt foolish, their bravado replaced with stark fear. Back at the camp, they sat in tense silence, jumping at every sound, their eyes continuously scanning the surrounding darkness. They waited for Noah, hoping against hope that he was playing a prank. But as the hours ticked by and their fire started to wane, they had to face the harsh reality: Noah was gone. The realization that the witch's tale might be real hit them like a ton of bricks. The dark figure from the first night, the eerie sensation of being watched, and now Noah's disappearance all pointed to a horrifying conclusion: they were not alone in the woods, and the witch was more than just a legend. As the night deepened, fear clutched their hearts tighter. Their laughter and skepticism had brought them into the belly of a nightmare they weren't prepared for. The second night in the forest marked the beginning of a terrifying struggle, one they hadn't foreseen or believed possible. The fight for survival had begun. The night had settled in, drawing a dark veil over the forest. The once familiar rustling of leaves and chirping of night insects had turned into an ominous symphony of the unseen. The lingering laughter and light-hearted banter around the fire had ceased, replaced by a silence that was deafening. The tales they had read about the witch, which had seemed exciting and otherworldly at first, now hung over them like a deathly pallor. It was during one of these tense silences that they saw it again, the dark figure. This time, however, it wasn't just a fleeting shadow. As they squinted into the darkness, their hearts pounding in their chests, they could make out the shape clearly. It was the witch. She was real. The moonlight illuminated her dreadful form, her silhouette standing tall and foreboding at the edge of the forest. She was not human. Her eyes glowed like embers in the dark, and her skin was as pale as the moonlight itself. Her long, gnarled fingers ended in sharp talons, and her face was a grotesque mask of terror, a nightmare brought to life. The sight of her was paralyzing, her mere presence a physical manifestation of the fear that had been slowly creeping into their hearts. They were staring at the embodiment of their worst fears, the witch they had mocked, standing there in flesh and blood, or whatever hellish material she was made of. Her appearance prompted a flurry of hushed whispers and panicked looks amongst the group. The terrifying reality of the situation dawned upon them. They were trapped in the depths of the forest with a creature from hell. Their minds raced as they desperately tried to come up with a plan of escape, their eyes never leaving the ominous figure at the edge of the forest. Ethan, the brave one, took a step forward, holding out the old book as if it were a shield. His voice trembled as he started reciting an incantation from the book, a desperate attempt to ward off the witch. But the witch merely tilted her head, a cruel smirk playing on her horrifying face. It was as if she was amused by their futile attempts. The realization that they were truly helpless hit them hard. Their bravado had brought them into the belly of a nightmare. Their disbelief had made them targets of a predator they did not understand. The eerie silence of the forest was broken by the chilling laughter of the witch, a sound that would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives. Escape was not an option anymore. They were deep in the witch's territory, with no sense of direction or hope of reaching the edge of the forest. All they could do was huddle closer together, their faces reflecting the stark terror they felt, their bodies trembling in sync with the rustling leaves. Their once thrilling camping trip had turned into a fight for survival, a deadly game with a creature from hell. And as they stood there, under the haunting glow of the moon, in the presence of the terrifying witch, they knew this was just the beginning of their nightmare. The horrifying realization of their predicament had barely sunk in when the first attack came. The witch, a terrifying silhouette against the dark forest backdrop, lunged at them with a guttural growl. The campsite erupted into chaos as the teenagers scrambled to defend themselves. Noah was the first to fall. His screams echoed through the silent forest, cutting through the night like a serrated blade. The others watched in horror as he was dragged into the darkness, his desperate pleas gradually fading away. The witch had claimed her first victim. Sarah, the most resourceful among them, quickly tried to rally the group. She had been quiet till now, her eyes wide and alert, taking in every detail of the unfolding nightmare. Shaking off her fear, she grabbed a burning stick from the fire and brandished it like a weapon, the orange flames casting an eerie glow on her face. The others followed suit, picking up whatever they could find: rocks, branches, even their camping utensils. Their bodies were trembling, adrenaline pumping through their veins as they prepared for another attack. The once carefree group of friends had been thrust into a deadly fight for survival. Yet, despite their desperate attempts, they were no match for the witch. One by one, they fell to her. Alex was next, his body found by the stream the following morning, his face a mask of terror. Olivia disappeared from her tent in the middle of the night, her shrill screams still echoing in their ears. Ethan, the bravest among them, was taken in broad daylight, his struggle witnessed by a paralyzed Sarah. Each loss was a blow, chipping away at their sanity and hope. Their initial disbelief had turned into unimaginable fear and despair. They were trapped in a horrifying reality, hunted by a creature beyond their comprehension. Sarah, the last one standing, found herself alone in the forest that had once seemed so inviting. The laughter and excitement of their first night felt like a distant dream, replaced by the cruel reality of death and fear. She clutched the old buck tightly, her only link to the outside world, her only source of hope. The struggle was relentless. The witch was relentless. She hunted them down like a predator, her presence a constant terror lurking in the shadows. The cheerful group of teenagers that had ventured into the forest, laughing at the old witch's tale, had been reduced to mere memories. The forest had claimed them, swallowed their laughter and bravado, replacing it with silence and despair. All that remained was Sarah, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear and determination. She was the sole witness to the horror, the lone survivor in the fight against the witch. Their struggle was a grim testament to the reality of the witch's tale, a stark reminder of their folly. They had walked into the witch's territory, armed with nothing but their disbelief and youthful recklessness. Now, all that remained was fear, loss, and a desperate fight for survival against an enemy they could neither understand nor defeat. Days turned into nights and nights into days, blurring together in a cycle of terror and despair. Sarah, the last one standing, could feel her strength and sanity slipping away. The once vibrant forest, now tainted with the horrifying memories of her friends, seemed to be closing in on her. On the 9th day, the witch came for her. The terror-filled silence of the forest was pierced by the witch's bone-chilling shriek, a sound Sarah had come to dread. The witch emerged from the shadows, her gruesome figure illuminated by the soft moonlight. The time had come for the final confrontation. Despite her fear, Sarah fought with everything she had. She used the environment to her advantage, throwing rocks, swinging branches, and even using the old buck to fend off the witch. But the witch was not easily deterred. In the struggle that ensued, Sarah managed to land a burning branch on the witch, who shrieked in pain. Using this opportunity, Sarah made a desperate run for it. She could hear the witch's enraged shrieks behind her, the sound pushing her to run faster, to fight harder. After what seemed like an eternity, she stumbled out of the forest and onto a deserted road. Her body was a mess of bruises and cuts, her clothes torn and stained with dirt and blood. She was barely alive, but she had survived. She was free. A passing motorist found her lying on the side of the road, unconscious and barely breathing. He immediately alerted the authorities, and Sarah was rushed to the hospital. When she finally regained consciousness, she recounted the horrifying events, her voice barely above a whisper. Her story was met with shock and disbelief. A search party was sent to the forest, combing the dense foliage for any signs of the missing teenagers or the witch. They found the abandoned campsite, the torn tents, and scattered belongings bearing silent testament to the terror-filled nights. But there was no sign of the witch or the other teenagers. The forest had swallowed them whole, hiding its dark secrets beneath a canopy of towering trees. The authorities declared them missing, their case left open in the hope of finding some clues in the future. Sarah was discharged from the hospital after weeks of intensive care. Physically, she was on the mend. But emotionally and mentally, her scars were still raw, her memories a horrifying tapestry of the recent events. Her survival had been a miracle, but the loss of her friends and the trauma of the encounter with the witch were burdens she carried with her every day. Her tale was dismissed by the authorities as a traumatic hallucination, a stress-induced nightmare. The official report stated that the teenagers had been victims of a wild animal attack, their bodies presumably carried off by the forest's natural scavengers. The evidence at the campsite, shredded tents, scattered belongings, was consistent with such an incident. But there was no sign of the witch, no physical evidence to support Sarah's chilling story. Despite the skepticism and disbelief, Sarah held firm to her account. She spent hours with sketch artists, describing the horrifying figure of the witch. She pored over historical records, seeking any information that might corroborate her experience. She reached out to paranormal investigators, witchcraft scholars, even cryptid hunters, in a desperate bid to validate her story. Yet, her efforts were often met with dismissive nods and skeptical glances. People viewed her story as an exaggerated account of a tragic incident, a product of trauma and survivor's guilt. But Sarah knew what she had seen, what she had experienced. The terrifying reality of the witch was etched deep into her soul, a constant reminder of the horror she had faced. Over the years, Sarah became somewhat of a recluse, devoting her life to unraveling the truth of the witch. She gave interviews, wrote articles, even published a book detailing her ordeal, aptly titled The Survivor's Tale. She shared sketches of the witch, recounted her friends' gruesome deaths, and meticulously detailed her 9-day struggle for survival. She faced ridicule, backlash, and even threats, but she persevered. She became a beacon for others who had experienced paranormal events, encouraging them to share their stories. She also became a grim reminder of the chilling tale of the witch, a living testament to the horror that lurked in the depths of the forest. Despite her tireless efforts, the existence of the witch remained a widely debated topic. Some viewed it as an urban legend, a chilling tale spun around campfires. Others saw it as a tragic incident, a gruesome example of the effects of trauma and loss. But for Sarah, it was a haunting reality, a life-altering encounter that had cost her friends their lives and left her scarred. She had faced the unimaginable and survived, and she was determined to ensure that the witch's tale, however unbelievable, was not dismissed as mere folklore. It was a chilling warning, a reminder of the dangers that lurked beyond the realm of human understanding, waiting for their next victims. 50 years later. 50 years had passed since the chilling events in the forest. The tales of the witch had faded into the background, becoming an urban legend shared among local residents. Sarah, now an elderly woman, had spent her life dedicated to preserving the horrifying truth, but time had a way of distorting reality into folklore. It was during this time, in a dusty corner of a small-town library, that a group of teenagers came across an old, worn-out book. It was the same book that Sarah and her friends had discovered all those years ago, the one that contained the chilling tale of the witch. The group consisted of 5 friends, all marked by the invincibility of youth. They flipped through the aged pages, their eyes wide with intrigue and excitement as they read about the witch's tale. They laughed at the old sketches, shrugged off the detailed accounts, and ignored the warnings. "Imagine how much fun it would be to camp in those woods," one of them said, his eyes sparkling with youthful recklessness. The idea took root, and soon they were making plans, fueled by their shared curiosity and the thrill of challenging the eerie tale. They knew of Sarah, the lone survivor, whose cautionary accounts they dismissed as the ramblings of an old woman. Their confidence in their invincibility made them dismissive of the potential danger. One sunny summer afternoon, the group set off, armed with camping gear and the infectious excitement of a new adventure. They laughed and joked, their voices echoing through the quiet town as they made their way to the forest. The locals watched them, their eyes filled with a mix of concern and resignation. They remembered the old tales, the warnings of the past, but these were not their children to scold or protect. The forest welcomed the new group, its tall trees swaying gently in the breeze, the air filled with the fresh scent of pine. The teenagers set up their camp, their voices filled with laughter and excitement, their minds far from the chilling tale of the witch. As night fell, they huddled around the campfire, the old book in hand, reading aloud the tale of the witch. The fire cast long shadows around them, the darkness of the forest looming just beyond their circle of light. They were blissfully unaware of the pair of gleaming eyes watching them from the shadows, of the soft rustling of leaves as a dark figure moved closer. History, it seemed, was repeating itself. The cycle of horror that Sarah had tried so hard to break was starting anew. Unfazed by the past, ignorant of the warning signs, a new group of unsuspecting teenagers had wandered into the witch's domain. The tale of the witch, dismissed as folklore, was about to become a horrifying reality once again.